So guys, I hope you enjoyed the very brief lunch break. There'll be plenty more time. As you have seen, today is a get-together of great friends, great pioneers, great innovators. And our next speaker, as you might have glimpsed, is absolutely up there. I met Ben a few years ago. He is the co-founder and CEO of Colossal Biosciences, which is the world's first de-extinction company. And we'll talk a lot more about that. Ben is a serial entrepreneur, he's an innovator, he is a visionary, and nothing is too far away or impossible for Ben. Ben, come on stage.
Thank you. That was really kind.
Hi, my friend.
Well,
good to see you. Good to see you. So this is going to be a fun session. Ben and I always enjoy having these conversations, and we are going to...
He actually saw it before we got started. Like, you saw it like day one, and you're like, this is insane.
I remember driving in Dallas trying to find where you were, and I walk in this huge space. It's like warehouses and so on. I'm like, is this like cutting edge? And I walk in, and I was blown away. And I'll tell you one thing, if you haven't done it, his company is one of the most amazing companies, and I will say, coming back, my kids think I'm cool, right?
Literally 30% of our investors come from kids. Literally like 30% of our investors, they tell us that they invested and they got to know the company because kids.
So Ben, let's get started. And I'll get started with one thing that really struck me when we first met. You know, I came to see biology and science and so on. I said, yeah, we're in the entertainment business. I'm like, I look around, I said, entertainment. So let's talk about that. Why is making science cool, exciting, fun, culturally relevant something that is important today?
Yeah, well, science, the days of like Bill Nye and like, taking like food coloring and mixing it and like making a volcano, those days of like science fairs, at least in the US, are kind of gone, right? You kind of separated where you've got governments and other people that are kind of attacking like traditional science, number one. Number two, our kids, we live in this like attention economy is what people are calling it, right? And so like, we're like constantly like, our kids don't want to grow up and be, physicists or scientists. They want to grow up and be, what's the next influencer or what's the next makeup brand I can launch, right? And so I built a handful of software companies before this and thought, I want to do something that's interesting. I want to do something, I'm a new father, so a little older father, I guess, but a new father, which is, actually the hardest thing we're doing is not dire wolves or mammoths. Going from 1 to 2 kids is something that no one tells you about, and that's insane. That's a journey that I'm on right now, which is insane. But I really want to do something that would like inspire kids, because no matter what innovations that we come up or talk about at Davos and try to do, it's really our kids that are going to inherit our problems and the solutions that we're trying to implement. And so if we don't get kids excited about science again in those days of like wonder of like the Apollo program, I think we're totally screwed.
So Ben, it's interesting. We talk about the extinction, which is obviously where you're in the headlines with the dire wolf. You have your new MOA with Peter Jackson. But conservation is something that is not talked as much.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. The press doesn't cover it as much because they like the clickbaits. But yeah, so all of the technologies that we make on the path to de-extinction, we open source for conservation. And if you don't learn anything from any talk at Davos this year, I hope you take this away. We will lose up to 50% of biodiversity in the next 25 to 30 years. And generally everyone in the conservation community agrees that. So we're fighting a losing battle, and we need new technologies. And our view is, it's better to have a de-extinction toolkit and not need it than need a de-extinction toolkit and not have it, because so much of the world's food supply and water and so many ecosystems depend on these keystone species. And so conservation is at the core of what we're doing. And we're actually working on more conservation projects than de-extinction projects, even though they just don't get as flashy of headlines.
You and I will do some flying because I really need to see these places. When we talk about these fields like conservation and de-extinction, why is building this broader economic ecosystem just as important as the science itself? Because the science in itself is pretty hard, right?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we think about how do we apply these technologies to the ecosystem, and how do we also look for economic models that can also fund these types of projects. Like, For Colossal, we've got a couple really interesting ways to monetize. In the early days, people just thought it was a bunch of rich people that were weird wanting to see, dinosaurs. We've thankfully evolved people's thinking around that. But it really takes, to solve some of these existential crises like biodiversity loss, we really have to invest the right amount of capital and the right level of innovation. So you've got to build the entire ecosystem, which involves not just the investor community and the scientific community and the conservation community, but also the indigenous community, governments. Like we're working now with world governments that are helping empower our technologies into the hands of their people to actually save species. And you've got to build that entire ecosystem. If all we had to do was stay in a lab and throw some stuff on YouTube like Mr. Beast, it would be amazing. Unfortunately, all of that soft work that we have to do in the field, it's about 50% of the job.
And Ben, it's interesting, we talk about de-extinction, but here it is perhaps also about solving extinction in the first place, right? Not just slowing it down,
right,
but actually solving it.
Yeah.
How do you plan to do that? Because that's a big statement. By the way, if there's anybody who's going to do it, it's you.
We're trying. So it's not me. We have a team of 260 scientists that are way smarter than me. But what's interesting is like a lot of the work that we've done and that Europe's done so well to protect like the seed vault and whatnot, that doesn't exist for animals. It's highly fragmented. When I started this, I came from software and I thought, oh, we'll just simply go to the GCP of species and we'll pull down the DNA and we'll do all the comparative genomics. I built 3 AI companies before this, so I thought, oh, this will be easy. But I was shocked because I knew of 23andMe and stuff that didn't exist. So you have to go build all this foundational work that doesn't exist. And so one of the big initiatives that our foundation, we raised another $100 million for our foundation. And one of the big initiatives for our foundation is a BioVault. Like, how do we create the same standards that we have for plants for animals, right? And if you don't love animals and you don't see their value to ecosystem, you can at least see some of the medical applications. I met some folks from Merck and others that are doing great work backstage, and a lot of this research comes from non-model species, right? Like elephants don't really get cancer based on age and body weight due to kind of an overexpression of P53. If you look at the GLP-1s, which I'm not going to ask anyone to raise your hands, but if anyone's on GLP-1s, some of that research came from a venomous lizard from Arizona, right? It's like that's not what most people know. And so there's value in the data of these species, and then there's value in protecting them. So we have to create some type of international standards around what we've done with plants for animals. And so I'd say, to me, that's more important than de-extinction, is really ensuring that we have a backup plan, because we know the current models of like $500 black tie dinners for conservation, where 5% of the money actually goes to the field, isn't saving species.
No, that's true. I remember when I first came to see you, we're just setting up our latest fund at iGrow. Bureaucracy took a little bit longer. So guys, his company, since I spoke to him, is only at 10x, and that was a year ago, just letting you know. You have a long runway, and that's one thing you did. You build a long runway. Do you think that gives you enough time? Because you really have a tough task. You need to build a whole economic ecosystem, right? And put it together before you actually arrive at your first commercial product.
Yeah, so we have about 7 years of runway right now. We try to be really thoughtful. Having built 6 companies before this, I hadn't really thought about ever having 7 years of runway for anything. But that doesn't change our sense of urgency because of the drama that we have with the problem. And so for us, and we're going to continue to raise capital. And so for us, I think it's important because science is really hard. And really, like we didn't invent CRISPR, we didn't discover some of these things. There are new innovations that we're building, that we built internally, like around DNA synthesis and somatic cell nuclear transfer, that are highly novel, but then we're just innovating. So you have to innovate on this very complex pipeline. You have to even just getting the media conditions for certain cell types is like sometimes an 18-month process. So we felt it was really key to ensure that our scientists not only were the best in the world, but had enough runway. And so we've tried to be really thoughtful about the capital and how we look at the business. But early on, we've also shown quick optionality for investors. And we've spun out 4 companies, 2 of which we've announced. The first 2 are worth over $100 million. One's in computational biology, and the second one is plastic degradation, because that's also a big problem. And I think that we've tried to show short-term gains and mid-term gains for our investor base as we've kind of built this kind of longer event horizon around our long-term revenue products.
And it's interesting because you're in a field where there's a lot of doom and gloom, there's a lot of fear at times. How important is changing that narrative, right? Away from that into something where there's storytelling. We're going to be hearing from Sandy Kleeman on storytelling in a little while.
That's awesome.
And even entertainment.
Well, you have to, like, I spoke at the Aspen Institute last summer, or Aspen Innovation, whatever it's called. And what was interesting and terrifying is they said that the 24-hour news cycle that we now live in, coupled with the fact that we're only telling our kids about doom and gloom, it's actually not motivating them to get off their iPads and TikToks and go solve problems. It's actually show all the data, like not some of the data, all the data is showing that they're just shutting down. They're like, we can't solve that problem. We'll go work on this, but we can't solve these problems. Are like it's a hopelessness, right? Which we know leads to depression, leads to suicide, leads to all these different things. So one of the things that we care a lot about at Colossal is showing that there's hope, right? And that we can decisions that we've made in our generations before put us in this position, but we can out-innovate, right? We're doing that with human healthcare. We can do that with climate change. We can do that with the biodiversity crisis. Every day, there's been other crises before, like what we're in today. There's been crises before, there'll be crises afterwards. And if we don't have that hope and you don't have that next generation bought in that they can solve it, you have a problem. And so one of the things that we do is we try to spend a lot of time communicating that to teachers. You asked me to bring some of every single week, we get pictures from parents. So you're gonna have to use your imaginations. Pictures from parents and letters from parents and drawings of mammoths, and sometimes they're not perfectly anatomically correct, but we get parents and teachers and kids like writing us like hundreds every week. And you asked me to bring them, and I brought them, and they're at the damn hotel. And so,
well, they got close.
Yeah, but I got close. So if anybody wants to see them, I'll be at the Hard Rock. But but what's interesting is that inspiration. We had no idea how influential, but we're starting to get these letters from teachers saying we are like my kids are talking about it. I mentioned and kind of joke, but pretty true. A third of our investors came from kids. And so I think that it's just so important that we give them, something to get excited about versus doom and gloom. And all you hear about is extinction and climate change, and we're going to lose all this stuff. We've got to give them some hope.
And you touched upon it before. As you said, there's technology spin-outs coming out until we get to that full de-extinction, that roadmap becomes a reality. Are there perhaps other spin-outs that you think could help in that? So cool technology that comes out where people say, oh, just a sec, this originates from there, and it's actually very useful, and it's not that doom and gloom, or it's not.
I think the first, I don't think that our Form Bio, our computational biology platform, I think for people that are in the it's kind of like drug resurrection, if you will. And so people that are in the AV space love it, but like the average, what is the dad or mom in Iowa think of that, right? But that's one of the reasons why we launched Breaking.com, which is our plastic degradation project, is that we feel like everyone understands that plastic's a problem. Like it's in our bodies, we're ingesting a credit card size of plastics, it's in the oceans, on the beach, it's everywhere, right? So we launched that project. We have a really cool project that we'll be launching, I think this year, that I think will have that same kind of like hope plus splash of magic to it that I think people will get pretty excited about. But that is part of the thing. So we try to make those decisions on not just even though and for some of the medical people here, we're doing 98 plus edits in one delivery with over 95% efficiency. Anybody in the world that's deep in this field say, that's pretty impressive, and I think we'll be doing hundreds this year. And so what's interesting about that is that could go be a business, but we're not focusing on that yet. We're really focusing on these other things that are kind of more consumer focused to get people excited.
The more I hear Ben speak, the more you guys understand why I make this pilgrimage to Dallas to go and see him.
You got to come see the new lab. It's ridiculous.
I'm coming. Every time I leave that lab, I'm blown away, and I'm like, okay, now there's so many possibilities and what we're doing, which is super exciting. What role do you think does community have to play in taking high-risk science and making it durable over time, right?
I think it's as important as the scientists. There's so much incredible work being done in universities that doesn't see the light of day because it doesn't get the right coverage, it doesn't get the right press, doesn't get the right financial backing. And so I do think that certain institutes out there that are trying to do more, like the VEAS and others, are at least pushing it somewhat. But I really think that the entire community's acceptance in pushing it is key. But you have to have a hunger for it too, right? And so it's like you have to have if your kids are asking you about it, then you're going to lean into it, right? Unless you've got certain types of disease states or you're a scientist, you're not if on your average, at least from an American's perspective, the average American isn't diving in trying to understand like CAR T therapies. Like they're just not doing that, right? Yep. Unless it affects them daily. And so how can we do something that like we think's like kind of like the biology equivalent to the moon landing for engineering, only for biology, which we think de-extinction is, that engages everybody. Like we've yet to meet someone that doesn't have an opinion on our project, right? So, thankfully mostly are positive, but like even the people that hate it, they still want to talk to you about it, right? And it just starts a dialogue, right? And I think that's part of the mission of what we do here at Davos every year, right? Is like it starts a conversation even when you don't agree. And I think that's so important because I think the community has as much importance to the success of science as the breakthrough in the lab.
And I'm sure it's one thing you come across, and I remember when we're speaking, managing investors and people that don't necessarily believe in your vision or the naysayers. It's going to happen, it's impossible, and so on. How do you balance that scientific integrity that you need? And scientific integrity is not 1 week, 1 quarter, 2 quarters.
Yeah.
You're taking painful decisions. I saw the equipment. I saw what you guys are doing. It is transformational. How do you balance that with kind of that immediate need of what we most face every day?
So other than going from 1 to 2 kids, the second hardest thing is reprogramming PhDs from the publish or perish model to the, we actually have to deliver things in a systems model versus a point solution that may or may not be repeated in a lab. I think it's very, very important for us to maintain that scientific integrity. So what we do is, we fund 17 academic universities. We fund 80 postdocs in addition to our 260. So we work very, very closely with academia on that. And then we actually push most of those papers before they go into peer review into academia and say, look, this is y'all's career, right? Like you care more about the paper than us. Colossal only puts out 1 or 2 papers a year because, if we put out a paper every time we had a press release or innovation, I'd have to hire 1,000 people to write papers, and then it would take 40 years to get through Nature and Science that, believe it or not, kids don't read anyway. So for us, we focus on the results, and then we work with our academic partners to ensure that they are vetting all the science and then pushing it out. So maintaining that academic model is really key, but it also works as a double-edged sword because it's also a huge recruiting source for us. Like we just took over a academic lab at a university that had a financial funding issue that we really thought had great science, and we did a public-private partnership where we kind of bought the lab. So it's kind of crazy on a university campus, and so we took over 60 postdocs that lost all their funding. And so now they're all funded through their postdocs, and then they have an immediate career advancement into the company if they want it.
Wow. Before I'll continue, if there are any questions, I just want to make sure that you're included in the dialogue. Any questions for Ben? Okay. There we go. Let me grab. May I have a microphone? Excuse me? May I have a handheld? Perfect. If you don't mind giving it to the gentleman over there. Raise your hand.
Yeah, but
yes, please, a question, not a long statement.
I hate long statements. No, look,
Sorry.
I kind of knew your company. I saw you on Joe Rogan. Amazing, right? And after that, I was talking to the head of Zurich Zoo. We were talking about extinctions. And he said, once a species is gone, it's gone forever. I was like, yeah, but what about companies like Colossal? And he was like, nah, not gonna happen. It's not really the same thing. So my question was, do you already work with conservation department at zoos?
It's a great question. It's almost I'll try to be short in the answer, but it's almost fragmented in two. So one, we have a Colossal Foundation that's separate from our for-profit, and we have 75 partners from around the world that we work on projects with. As I mentioned, we have more, if you go to colossalfoundation.org, you'll actually see we have more conservation initiatives going on than we do de-extinction initiatives. And there's 75 partners, including some of the top zoos in the world. Now, zoos are great. Sometimes they get a really bad rap. I mean, yes, you got your Tiger King type things out there that aren't great, but a lot of really great accredited zoos do great work for conservation, and they don't really get the right thing. But the other comment that he made is completely right. You know, what's interesting is sometimes when people want to debate us over like our mammoth, they're like, is it a mammoth or is it not? It's like, well, and they're like, because you cannot clone an extinct species if you don't have living cells, right? But that's why this BioVault is also so important, because we could clone from that and we could engineer in genetic diversity. But what's key in what he said, which is correct, speciation is a human-made construct. Like, we like to think in boxes, so we put it, but evolution kind of works like a river, right? So I've got 104 mammoth genomes over 1.2 million years of genetic divergence. Which one's a mammoth? I'll tell you which one's a mammoth. None of them. That's just how we classify them. It's all the fixed mutations that drive the core phenotypes that gave them the adaptability for their environment at that time that really makes them a mammoth. And that's what we're trying to preserve.
Please grab the microphone so we can hear you.
Yeah.
My follow-up would be that, I mean, if some bug gets extincted, who cares, right? I mean, if the panda gets extincted, we are sorry, but whatever.
But I have to respond to that. I don't agree with that, because you don't care, right? And pandas, like, I think they actually are pretty bad at having sex, right? But at the end of the day, but that's culturally important to an entire group of people, right? Like, you may not care about the Tasmanian tiger, but it's part of the origin story for the Aboriginal people in Tasmania, right? And so I think we have to care about these. Just because they may not serve an ecological function or be the fluffiest, biggest animal, doesn't mean we shouldn't care.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you don't mind passing on.
Sorry.
Hi, everybody. By the way, I care about animals. I'm Margaret Gonzalez. I'm the founder of CEO of Capital Variation, and we work with more than 1,000 family offices, and currently we're selecting a number of top foundations in the world. So my question to you is, what are your differentiator between all the foundations around the world that are currently working in your field?
So our foundation really has kind of two purposes, and it's funded based off our LPs. So our LPs are well off, and they have their own foundations. We allow them to fund our foundation. So we're not actively going out. Our biggest goal is to bring new money and more capital to this problem, not compete with existing capital, right? Like, the last thing we want to do is take money away from, like, Save the Elephants or Rewild, two of our incredible partners. We want to bring more money to them. So our capital that we bring in is new, one, and number two, we want it to be a focus on both the BioVault Initiative and species preservation, and then secondly, we want to do it to empower people to use our technologies. So we can invent the coolest thing. We came up with a new way to do non-invasive cloning through cells that we identified called EPCs in the bloodstream. So it's all of our animal rights teams, they love it. You know, Humane Global loves it. Like, all these people say, "Wow, that's incredible! You don't have to hurt the animal. It's amazing." But what's interesting about that is that if I give you a car, and no matter how great the car is, if you have no gas or can't afford gas, doesn't help. So we use part of that money to subsidize projects that will then use those technologies for benefit. And then the third part that we do at the foundation is we don't believe that only good ideas come from Colossal. So we also fund research groups. Like, we made the largest investment in a project called Chytrid. So if you want something cool to go work on this. It's a fungus that is driving more mass extinctions than anything with amphibians. And so we made the largest financial commitment to that. But that's not our tech. That's a University of Melbourne. We just gave them the money and said we looked at 12 different solutions, and theirs by far was the best.
Conversation later on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm super easy. I'm just
passing the microphone over there
.com.
to the gentleman here, Manos. If you don't mind standing up, Manos.
So a question, can you use your database of information, biological information, complement that with some sort of AI to fill in the gaps in the puzzle to specifically design living organism for business purposes?
Yes, and so we're not currently doing that. It's a great question. Well, that's not true. I'd argue the micro project kind of is that, right? So we did a lot of comparative genomics. We took some data and some solutions out of the Wyss Institute. We kind of supercharged it and built a whole directed evolution path. And it is to solve that. This particular, it's actually a consortium of microbes that work together. We figured out how to modify them in a way that anything we threw at them in a pretty benign environment, they could just destroy and eat, which is pretty interesting for plastic degradation because they're not making microplastics and there's no pre-treatment, which a lot of times is actually worse than the plastics. It's actually breaking the chemical bonds. It's pretty interesting. So the biomass is it. But that's exactly what we did. We targeted that. There are other use cases around like ag tech and even defense that could be pretty interesting applying our technologies. And that's part of our mid-term strategy with monetization.
One last question, if you don't mind.
Just a quick follow-up from my 4-year-old son. When you're going to give us dinosaurs?
So this either makes some people very happy, probably the zoo guys, makes other people really sad, like your son. There is no dino DNA. So, DNA degrades very, very quickly. I'm a pretty big optimist, and so I would say and I don't like to use the word impossible or never, but I don't see a path to where we have DNA that survives so many different cycles over 65 million years. So I don't think that dino de-extinction is really in our future, even though I think it would be cool.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa Rich from Hemisphere Ventures. One of the first frontier tech funds in the US. I think we invested in your spin-out, Form Bio.
Oh, great.
So I wanted to hear what it's doing and how things are going.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I don't run it, but
we have a lot of companies. So.
As a board member, I think I probably should know the answers. It's doing really well. The company, just so everyone knows what it is, we spun out most of us that started the business that weren't biologists had built a handful of software companies. And so when you have a lot of software hammers, everything looks like a software nail. So Form Bio was our first, we needed it we do a lot of compute on our projects. And we spun out our first company called Form Bio. And what's interesting is we've had a breakthrough, I can't say what category it's in, where we basically went to drug makers, not all, some drug makers like some in this room are beyond incredible and they never mess up, but others do. And so we went to some that failed in the clinical trial process and failed in the manufacturability of the pharmaceutical treatment. And we built a system that we think we had hoped would make it where it was possible to find out if there were mistakes that could be made, where we get paid by the pharmaceutical company and we get an upside on that drug going to market. I will say that we've done, I think it's like 8 or 10 of those projects in the process. In the first 2, we've de-extincted the drug, and so they are going into clinical trials. It's on the drug. That's the drug company, so it's their decision on when they make those announcements. But the software is working and producing revenue right now. So we'll probably raise another round of capital at some point.
In wrapping up, final question. Let's fast forward 20 years. What does success look like for Colossal, for de-extinction, for the science?
So I'd love to see all of our flagship species, mammoth, thylacine, dodo, moa, thylacine, Tasmanian tiger, successfully reintroduced back in their habitat with governments, indigenous people groups, and private landowners supporting it, with enough genetic diversity in the population that they are truly thriving. And I'd love us to have an international animal seed vault, if you will, like a BioVault for animals, where all that data is stored for all vertebrate life on Earth, and that's being shared, in the scientific community.
Ben, thank you for being with us. I look forward to continuing the discussion next year. My friend.
Good to see you.
So good, huh?
Yeah,
Let's take a quick picture.
Oh.